I have ruled Vermore for 19 years, and in all that time, not one of my wolves has ever been wrong about a person. I know that now. I did not know it the afternoon Marin of the Eastern Road walked through my gate with a pack wolf twice her weight draped across her shoulders and blood on her sleeves that was not her own. My gate watch came to find me because they did not know what to do with her. She was not a merchant. She carried no sealed letter, no house mark, no name they recognized from the rolls of healers licensed to treat royal pack animals. She had simply appeared at the east gate at dusk with Roven, my second wolf, who had gone missing 4 days prior after a training run into the Highland passes. Alive, breathing, his broken forelegs splinted with what looked like 2 stripped branches and a length of woven grass, and his head resting against her shoulder with a peacefulness that none of my trained handlers had ever managed to get out of him on a good day. She says she found him below the Aren Ridge, my watch captain told me. 3 days' walk from here, she carried him the whole way. I went to the gate myself. She was younger than I expected. Not a girl, a woman grown, and one who stood her ground without any particular effort, the kind of steadiness that isn't performed because it doesn't need to be. She had dark hair pinned back with what appeared to be a twig, and she was looking not at me but at Roven, checking the splint, running her thumb along the wrap to test the tension. "You carried him 3 days," I said. "He would have died out there," she said, not looking up. "The leg was clean, but he'd lost blood and the cold was settling in. He needed warmth and movement." "Movement," I said. "You moved him." "Slowly," she said. "We stopped every few hours. He's heavier than he looks." She said it without humor and without apology, as though the fact of carrying an injured wolf 3 days through Highland passes was simply a thing she had done because it needed doing, the way a person fills a water jug or mends a fence. I told my watch to bring her inside. I told the handlers to take Roven gently. He did not want to leave her. That was the first thing I noticed. Roven, who I had seen bite a trained handler who moved too fast, who had once cleared a practice yard of 6 wolves by simply standing and staring, pressed his nose against her hand when the handlers lifted him, and looked back at her with an expression I had never seen on his face. She touched his ear. "Go on," she said. "I'll be close." He went. I should have sent her on her way that evening with coin and my formal thanks, and it would have been the sensible thing. Instead, I found myself telling my steward to put her in the healer's quarter for the night, because Roven would need monitoring through the cold hours, and she knew his condition better than anyone. That was how Marin of the Eastern Road came to stay in Vermore. I will tell you about my court, so you understand what she walked into. Vermore is not a soft kingdom. We are Highland wolves, stone towers, gray sky most of the year, the kind of cold that settles into the mortar of the walls and stays there until midsummer. My council is composed of men who have served my father and served me, and who have, for the last several years, been conducting what they believe is a subtle campaign to see me properly mated. It is not subtle. Lord Daven's family has been positioning his eldest daughter, Cress, for the role of Luna since the autumn. Cress is from a good bloodline, carries herself well in the hall, and has never once spoken to one of my wolves directly. She looks at them the way most people look at furniture, useful objects to acknowledge and move around. My council considers her an excellent candidate. My wolves consider her approximately as interesting as the stone floor. The full moon assembly was 6 weeks away. I knew what my council expected to happen at it. Lord Daven knew. Cress knew. The whole of my keep had a quiet, settled certainty about it that I had neither confirmed nor denied, because I had learned long ago that the fastest way to harden my council into a position was to argue against it before I was ready. I was not ready, that was the truth of it. I had spent 19 years running Vermore, managing borders and disputes and the endless work of keeping a Highland kingdom whole, and somewhere in the doing of it I had quietly stopped expecting to find a mate. My wolf had gone still on the subject. Not dead, present, attentive, watchful, but still, as though it were waiting for something it had no name for yet. Into this walked Marin, with her twig and her splinted wolf and her 3 days of mountain carrying, and lodged herself in the healer's quarter near the east gate, where she spent the first morning sitting on the floor of the wolf pen with Roven's head in her lap, singing something low and tuneless under her breath. I know this because I walked past the east gate on my morning rounds, which I do not normally do, and found myself stopping. She did not see me. She was focused entirely on Roven, checking his leg wrap, murmuring to him, scratching behind his ears with the patient attention of someone who has nowhere else to be and no desire to be anywhere else. Rovin, who had once bitten a minister who got too close on a festival day, had his eyes closed. I stood there longer than I should have, and then I kept walking, and I thought about it for the rest of the morning in a way that annoyed me considerably. She had no plan to stay. I want to be clear about that. Marin had come from the eastern passes, where she had apprenticed under an old healer named Corvin for 7 years before he died, and left her the cottage and the practice, and a reputation among the border villages that was spoken of in the particular tone people use for things they trust completely. She healed animals, mostly, wolves, horses, highland deer with broken legs that their herds couldn't support. But she would treat a person if they came to her, and they came to her regularly because she was good and because she did not charge what she couldn't be paid. She had no house name, no bloodline that anyone at my court had heard of, no letter of introduction, no sponsor, no angle. She had come because Rovin had dragged himself to her door bleeding, and she had not been able to leave him there. My steward, a practical man named Osric who has served Vermore loyally for 30 years, and who has approximately no interest in anything that cannot be logged in a ledger, came to me on her 3rd day and said, "The woman in the healer's quarter, the wolf carrier." "Marin," I said. "The wolf carrier," he said again, because Osric has a habit of naming people by their most recent notable action until he decides whether they merit a permanent label. She's been asked twice when she plans to leave. She says she'll leave when Rovin can walk without the splint. My handlers say that's 10 more days at minimum. "Then she stays 10 more days," I said. Osric looked at me with the particular expression he has used on me since I was 12 years old, which communicates that he has noted what I said, has formed a private opinion about it, and will say nothing about that opinion because it is not his place, but the opinion is there. "Very well, my lord," he said and left. On the 5th day, Fen found her. Fen is my lead wolf. He came to me when I was 22, chosen at the pairing ceremony on the 1st year of my rule, and he has been beside me for every significant thing that has happened in Vermore since. He is very large, very old by wolf reckoning, and possessed of a dignity that most of my court members could learn from. He does not perform warmth. He does not perform anything. He gives his attention to what he considers worth it, and ignores the rest with a completeness that some visitors have found alarming. In 7 years, he has permitted 4 people to touch him. Myself, my late head handler Bram, my steward Osric on one memorable occasion involving a storm and a very long night, and my youngest guard, a girl named Tessel who feeds him venison strips when she thinks I'm not watching. On the 5th day of Marin's stay, I came to the healer's quarter at mid-morning to check on Rovin's leg and found Fen already there. He was lying on the stone floor with his head in her lap. She was reading. She had a small, battered book open in one hand, and the other was resting on Fen's side, and she was turning pages with the calm ease of a woman who has been sitting this way for some time. She looked up when I came in, glanced down at Fen, and then back at me with an expression that held a careful neutrality over something that might have been apology. "I didn't invite him," she said. "He arrived about an hour ago and sat down. I didn't want to disturb him." I looked at Fen. Fen opened one eye, regarded me with the expression of a wolf who has made a decision and does not require my input on it, and closed his eye again. Something happened in my chest. It was not dramatic. It was not the ignition of something vast and immediate. It was quieter than that, more like the feeling of recognizing a word in a language you didn't know you'd been learning. A small, certain shift, like a key in a lock. "He doesn't usually do that," I said. "So I gathered," she said, "from the way your handlers keep looking in at us." She said it without embarrassment. She went back to her book. I stood in the doorway for a moment longer than was natural, and then I sat down on the bench near the wall, because it was where I usually sat to check Rovin's leg, and I checked Rovin's leg, and Marin read her book, and Fen breathed slowly between us, and it was the most peaceful 30 minutes I could remember having in some years. I left without saying anything of significance. I thought about it for the rest of the day in a way that was no longer merely annoying. It had become something more serious than that. On the 6th day, 3 more wolves found her. These were younger wolves from the outer pack, a tawny female named Syl, and 2 gray males who were brothers, Dace and Lore, who were reasonably well-mannered but had strong opinions about who they allowed near them. They were waiting at the door of the healer's quarter when Marin came out at dawn, and they followed her to the kitchen gate where she collected Roven's morning broth, and then followed her back, and arranged themselves in the pen with Fen and Roven as though this had always been the arrangement. My handlers did not know what to do. They came to me with the report, in the tone of people who have encountered a situation for which their training gave them no preparation. "She hasn't done anything to them," the senior handler said. "No food offerings that we've seen. No, she doesn't do anything. They follow her." "I know," I said. "Fen slept in the pen last night," he added. "He hasn't left the healer's quarter since yesterday morning." "I know," I said. He waited to see if there was something to be done about this. I told him to make sure the pen was comfortable and that Marin had what she needed for her patients, and he left with the look of a man who had received an answer that raised several new questions he was too respectful to ask. Lord Davin came to me that afternoon. He was polite about it. He is always polite, which is how he covers the fact that he is also almost always calculating. He said he had heard there was a woman staying in the healer's quarter, a border healer, no family name, who had been here some days now, and he wanted to make sure I was aware that the full moon assembly was approaching, and that certain expectations had been established, and that it might create unnecessary confusion if, he paused here, selecting his words, if there were unfamiliar presences in the keep that the court had not been formally introduced to. He did not say Marin's name. He referred to her twice as the border woman. "Her name is Marin," I said. "Of course," he said, and smiled and left. I sat with the weight of that conversation for longer than I wanted to. On the 8th day, Cress came to the healer's quarter. I was not there. I heard about it from Tessel, my youngest guard, who has sharp eyes and the good sense to share what she notices with me and no one else. Cress had come with 2 of her attendants, dressed for a formal visit, which struck Tessel as odd because the healer's quarter is not a place formal visits happen. She stayed for perhaps a quarter of an hour. When she left, she was composed, as she always is, but Tessel said her mouth was doing the thing it does when she is thinking harder than she wants to show. I asked Tessel what had happened. "The wolves didn't go near her," Tessel said. "Any of them." Fen looked at her and looked away. "And Lady Cress said something. I couldn't hear it exactly. And the woman, Marin, she just said, 'Yes, my lady,' very quietly, and went back to what she was doing." "What was she doing?" "Rewrapping Roven's leg," Tessel said. "She does it every morning. She talks to him while she does it. She was talking to him when Lady Cress arrived, and she went back to talking to him when Lady Cress left." "What does she say to him?" Tessel smiled just slightly. "She tells him what the morning looks like," she said. "The light, the weather, whether the passes look clear. She says she thinks he misses running." I said nothing. Tessel said, "The wolves are going to keep choosing her, my lord." She said it quietly and with the simplicity of a person stating a fact, and then she bowed and left, and I stood at my window and looked at the gray sky over Vermore for a long time. That evening, I went to the healer's quarter. Marin was alone. Fen and the 3 younger wolves were settled around the pen, and Roven was sleeping, his legs straight and clean, and she was writing something in a small notebook by the light of 2 candles. She looked up when I came in and waited. I said, "How is he?" "Better every day," she said. "He's been trying to put weight on it, which is good. Another week and he'll be testing it properly." "Another week," I said. "Give or take," she said. "Depends on what he decides to do with it." I sat on the bench. She went back to her notebook. We were quiet for a moment. "Marin," I said, "did Lord Davin's daughter say anything to you that I should know about?" She considered that. "She said I seemed very comfortable for someone who had no formal standing in the keep," she said. "She wasn't unkind about it. She said it the way someone says a thing they want you to hear clearly, but without any particular heat." "What did you say?" "I said, 'Yes, my lady,'" she said, "because it's true." I looked at her. She was watching me with an evenness that was not defiance and not submission, something else entirely, a quietness that came from inside rather than from any calculation about how to appear. "She's right that you have no formal standing," I said. "I know," she said. "I came to bring back your wolf." "You've stayed 12 days past that." "Roven isn't ready." "No," I said, and then because the honesty of the room seemed to require it. "Is that the only reason you've stayed?" She was quiet for a moment. Fen lifted his head and looked at me, and then looked at her, and then put his head back down with the settled certainty of a creature who already knows something the rest of us are still working out. "Your wolves are very comfortable to sit with," she said at last. "I don't get much quiet in the eastern passes. People and animals are always needing things." "They need things here too," I said. "Yes," she said, "but the wolves here are there restful." She paused. "Fen especially. He has a very settled sense of himself." I looked at Fen. He appeared unbothered by being discussed. "He hasn't let anyone outside this keep touch him in 7 years," I said. She looked at him too, her expression soft and thoughtful. "He seems like a wolf who knows what he trusts," she said. "I don't think he makes that distinction carelessly." "No," I said, "he doesn't." I left shortly after, but I sat at my desk for a long time that night in the quiet of my own rooms, and I thought about Fen's face when he had first laid his head in her lap, and about the small settled shift I had felt in my chest when I had walked in on them, and about the fact that my wolf, which had been still and waiting for 19 years, was beginning very quietly to stir. On the 10th day, Syl brought her a gift. It was a smooth river stone, dark gray with a faint stripe of white, the kind that Syl collected and kept tucked beneath the hay in her sleeping corner of the pen. My handlers had learned years ago not to remove them. Syl had never, to anyone's knowledge, given one away. Tessel found Marin at the kitchen gate with the stone cupped in both hands, looking at it with an expression that was not theatrical and not performative, just a woman looking at something she understood the weight of. "What does it mean when a wolf gives you a stone?" she asked Tessel. Tessel said she didn't know for certain, but she thought it meant Syl had decided on something. Marin held the stone carefully for the rest of the morning and slipped it into her pocket. "I heard about this at midday. I heard about it, and I stood very still for a moment in the middle of my council chamber, and Lord Davan was in the middle of a sentence about the full moon assembly, and I was not listening to a word of it. Something in me had come fully awake. It had not arrived as a roar or a blaze. It arrived the way the sun comes up over Highland stone, gradually, and then all at once, and you realize it has been coming for a long time and you simply hadn't been watching closely enough. My wolf was not stirring anymore. My wolf was certain. It had been certain for days. It had simply been waiting for me to stop being so careful about it and look. "My lord," Lord Davan said. "I heard you," I said, which was a lie but a small one. "The assembly is in 4 days," he said. "The court will be expecting." "I know what the court is expecting," I said. "I'll have an answer for you before the assembly." He left satisfied, which is the particular danger of Lord Davan. He is always satisfied with something, and it isn't always the thing you meant. On the 13th day, I went to Marin in the morning before the rest of the keep had woken fully. Roven was standing. Not with full weight, he had one foot lifted slightly, not trusting it entirely, but standing, his head up, watching the door with the alert brightness of a wolf who is beginning to think about the world outside the pen again. Marin was watching him from across the space, arms crossed loosely, her expression careful and glad and trying not to show how glad. "He'll be ready to walk the yard by tomorrow," she said. "If you want to see how he does on the training ground, I'd give it 2 more days." "And then you'll go," I said. She looked at me. "He won't need me anymore," she said. "I don't have a reason to stay." "No formal one," I said. She waited, still watching me, and her face had the same evenness it always had, that quality that I had stopped seeing as blankness and had come to understand was something else. Patience. A deep, unhurried patience that didn't require anything from anyone. "My wolves have been deciding things," I said, "that I should have been deciding for myself." "Wolves usually do," she said. "They don't wait for you to be ready." "Fen chose you on the 5th day." "Yes. Syl gave you a stone on the 10th. I still have it. Dace and Lore follow you to the kitchen every morning. They like the venison scraps the cook sets out," she said. "No," I said, "they like you. The venison scraps are an excuse." She was quiet. "There's a full moon assembly in 2 days," I said. "My court is expecting me to announce a Luna." Her expression did not change, but something behind it did, something careful and composed. the look of a woman preparing to hear something and accept it with dignity regardless of what it was. "I know," she said. "Osric told me, Lady Cress." "Marin," I said. She stopped. "My wolves chose you before I let myself understand what they were doing," I said. "And I have been watching you for 13 days, and I have understood it for more of those days than I was willing to admit." I paused. "My wolf has been still and waiting for 19 years. It is not still anymore." Something shifted in her face, slowly, like light changing. "You don't know me," she said softly. "Not truly." "I know what matters," I said. "I know you carried my wolf 3 days through mountain passes because you couldn't leave him bleeding. I know you healed him talking to him like he was a person who deserved to hear a kind voice. I know you speak to my wolves the way most people speak to old friends. I know Fen slept with his head in your lap and Syl gave you a stone, and Rovan looks at you the way he looks at the morning after a long winter." I paused. "I know you told Lady Cress you had no formal standing here, and you said it without flinching, because you don't lie about what you are to seem more than it." I paused again. "I know you have a river stone in your pocket right now." Her hand moved very slightly to her side. "Marin," I said, "I want you to stay, not because my wolves decided it, though they did, not because I have an assembly in 2 days and a court that requires an answer, though I do. I want you to stay because I cannot stand the thought of this keep without you in it, and that is something I have not been able to say about anything in a very long time." The pen was very quiet. Rovan had turned his head to watch us. Fen had not moved, but his ears were forward, and Syl had crept to the doorway of the inner pen and was watching us over her shoulder with the patient intensity of a wolf waiting for something obvious to be confirmed. Marin looked at me for a long moment. "Lord Davin is going to be very unhappy," she said. "Yes," I said. "Your council will have opinions." "They always do." "I have no house name," she said. "No bloodline your court will recognize. I came through your gate with a wolf on my shoulders, and I've been sleeping in the healer's quarter." "I know where you've been sleeping," I said. "I'd like to change that." Something moved through her expression that was not quite a smile, but was warm and real and entirely her own. "Is this how you usually ask someone to be your Luna?" she said. "Because you look like a man who has not done this before." "I am a man who has not done this before," I said. She looked at Fen. Fen regarded her steadily. She looked at Syl, who had her chin on the doorframe with an expression of absolute conviction. She looked back at me. "All right," she said. "All right," I said. She reached into her pocket and touched the stone briefly and then let it go. "Your wolves should have said something sooner," she said. "It would have saved us both time." "They did," I said. "I was the one who wasn't listening." The full moon assembly of Vermore is held in the Great Hall, which is the oldest room in the keep, gray stone walls, beams dark with age, candles lit all the way from the entrance to the raised table at the far end. The pack assembles in the half-dark, wolves and their handlers along the walls, the court in the main body of the room, my council at the table. The lead wolf stands at my left. Fen stood at my left. He did not usually come to assemblies. In fact, he had not attended one in 4 years because he found them tedious and my handlers had stopped asking him. He came to this one on his own, and he stood at my left, and the room was already doing the thing where people notice something and try to figure out what it means. Lord Davin was seated with Cress at the court table. Cress was in a gown the color of winter birch, her hair dressed formally, her composure exactly what it always was. She looked like a Luna. My council had decided she looked like a Luna. The assembled court had decided it. In the collective, quiet way courts decide things before they're told. I stood at the raised end of the hall and looked at the room, and the room looked back at me. Then the east door opened. Marin came in. She was wearing a gown that Osric had arranged, blue-gray, the color of Highland stone at dusk, simple and well-made, and her hair was down, which I had not seen before, and she walked with exactly the same unhurried quality she always had, as though crossing a formal court assembly hall was the same as crossing a healer's yard. She had the river stone in her pocket. I knew because I knew her. She took a position near the wall, not putting herself forward. She had not asked to be announced. She had simply come because I had asked her to be present, and she was. Fen turned his head. Then Syl, who had followed him in through the handler's side door, turned her head. Then Dace and Lore at the far wall turned their heads. And then, with the slow certainty of something inevitable that everyone in the room had suddenly no idea what to do with, all 4 of my wolves began to move. Not running, not urgently. Walking with the deliberate purposefulness of animals who have made a decision and are demonstrating it. They went to Marin. Fen reached her first. He put his head against her side, and she rested her hand on him without looking down, the way she always touched him, easily, without thought, as though it were where her hand had always belonged. Syl pressed against her other side. Dace and Lore sat at her feet. The hall went very quiet. It was not the quiet of a room that has been silenced. It was the quiet of a room that has understood something. Lord Davan's face was arranged in the careful expression of a man who is recalculating quickly. Cress was still composed, but her composure had the quality of something held in place by effort rather than ease. The council had stopped their murmuring entirely. And then I felt it. On my left wrist, beneath the cuff of my sleeve. A warmth, low and steady and spreading upward through my arm and into my chest, not heat, not pain, something older and calmer than either of those, the feeling of something long set finally being recognized. I turned my wrist without thinking, and when I opened my sleeve the mate mark was there, tracing itself across my skin in a pattern of pale silver gold, quiet and unmistakable. I had never seen a mate mark form. I had heard of it. Every alpha king of Vermore since the kingdom's first stone was laid had carried one, appearing in the moment of fated recognition. It had taken 19 years, and a healer from the Eastern Road to make mine appear. I walked across the hall. The room watched. No one spoke. My boots on the stone floor were the only sound, and then I was in front of Marin, and she was looking up at me with an expression that was very still and very steady and entirely unafraid. I held out my wrist. She looked at the mark, then she looked at me. "You could feel it," I said. "A warmth," she said quietly, "like something settling." "Yes," I said. I took her hand. I have stood in this hall and made announcements about wars and treaties and harvests and losses. I have never made an announcement that the room was so thoroughly prepared to hear and so thoroughly unprepared for at the same time. "Vermore," I said, my voice carried. It always does. 19 years of ruling have made sure of that. The lead wolf of the royal pack and 3 of the 4 outer pack wolves have made their position known. The mate mark of the alpha king has appeared. I turned her hand over in mine gently. "This is Marin of the Eastern Road. She is the pack's choice and mine." I paused. "She is my Luna." The room was very quiet for a long moment. Then one by one, the wolves in the hall, not just Fen and Syl and Dace and Lore, but the 12 handlers' wolves along the walls, wolves I had not directed or asked, lowered their heads. It was not a trained gesture. Wolves do not bow on command. They bow because something in them recognizes something larger than the instruction they've been given. 12 wolves bowed to Marin. The court followed, because a court reads its wolves before it reads its king. Lord Davan bent his head last, with the careful steadiness of a man accepting a thing he did not choose but recognizes as settled. Cress looked at the floor with dignity and grace. Whatever else she was, she had that, and I respected her for it. Marin's hand was steady in mine. She was looking at the hall with an expression that was not triumph and not surprise, something quieter, a kind of wondering solemnity, as though she were hearing something she had perhaps known was possible but had not quite let herself expect. "Is this usually how it goes?" she said under her breath to me alone. "No," I said. "This has never happened in Vermore before." "The 12 wolves all at once?" "Yes." She looked at Fen, who was sitting beside her with all the dignity of a wolf who has been right about something for some time, and is entirely comfortable being right about it. "Your wolves have better sense than you," she said, so quietly only I could hear. "In this case," I said, "yes." She let out a slow breath, and her hand tightened slightly in mine, not nervously, firmly. The grip of a woman who has made her decision and is holding it. We walked out of the hall together, and the keep of Vermore made way, and Fen walked at her left side and I walked at her right, and it occurred to me, not as a formal thought, not as the proclamation a king would make, but as a plain, quiet fact I had been arriving at for 13 days, that the greatest skill my wolves had ever taught me was knowing before I did. I have thought about this since, about Fen on the 5th day, crossing the healer's quarter floor with the certainty of a creature that does not second-guess what it knows, about Syl's stone, About Rovan looking back at her at the gate with that expression that I now understood was the expression of a wolf recognizing the person who is going to matter. I had told Marin that my wolf had been still and waiting for 19 years. What I understood now was that it had not been waiting for her. It had been waiting for me to be the kind of man who deserved her, someone who could learn to be as certain as his wolves, who could cross a floor with the same uncomplicated honesty that Fen had crossed a floor, who could take a woman's hand in front of a court full of expectations and say this, plainly and without apology, because it was true. Marin made Vermore softer without softening it. She moved through the keep the way she moved through everything, unhurried, present, speaking to the wolves and the stable horses and the old cook and my youngest guard with the same quality of attention, as though every creature she encountered was worth the full weight of her being there. She took nothing I didn't freely give, and she gave everything without being asked, and in that she was the most honest person in my keep and possibly one of the most honest people I have ever known. Rovan ran the training ground on the 16th day, full weight on the leg, his gait steady, his head up. He ran 3 circuits and came back to Marin and pressed his forehead against her hand. She told him he'd done well. She told him the passes were probably clear now, if he felt like running the Highland Road next week, and that he should take Syl because Syl had been restless. She told him she thought the morning smelled like early summer coming, which was hopeful. He turned in a circle twice, which I had learned was what Rovan did when he was satisfied, and went back to the pack. I was standing a few feet away, watching. "You talk to them about the weather," I said, "even when they can go outside and feel it themselves." "They like knowing someone noticed it with them," she said. "I thought about that." "The stone," I said. "Syl's stone, do you still have it?" She reached into her pocket and held it out, dark gray, white stripes, smooth. "You're going to keep it," I said. "I'm going to keep it," she said. I looked at it in her palm, and then I looked at her, and the morning light was coming through the training ground gate the way it does in early summer on Highland stone, low and gold and very quiet, and I thought, here, this is where I am. This is the thing I did not know I was waiting for, and now it is here, and I will not be careless with it. "Come on," she said, and tucked the stone away and turned toward the keep. "Your steward has been looking for you since sunrise, something about the eastern border levies." "How do you know what Osric wants?" "He told me," she said. "He was looking for you near the pen and he found me instead. He seemed mildly frustrated." "Osric is always mildly frustrated." "He told me that too," she said. She walked ahead of me toward the keep door, and Fen fell into step beside her without being called, and Syl followed Fen, and I followed all of them into the stone morning of Vermore, into the ordinary beautiful work of the day. The stone in her pocket had been Syl's first, now it was hers. Some things pass between the right hands without needing to be asked.